Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Pollock, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Welcome to another edition of the Critical Post Chicago Report. Thanks again for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it. If you can remember to go to the head page of the Critical Post Chicago and click on an ad, we'd appreciate that as well. Google will pay us. We'd like to bid a welcome to the newest subscribers on our YouTube channel. Thank you from the Critical Post Chicago for your kind attentions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been and continue to monitor hundreds of newspapers around the world and in America by various means. We listen to several radio commentators left, right. There is no center. We'll remind people again, as reported here first, that H.R. 5736, the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, made the use of propaganda by the federal government legal upon the good people of America. The verbiage of the act can be accessed at the head page of the Critical Post. This act by Congress was inserted into the National Defense Authorization Acts of 2012, 2015, respectively, and signed into law by the President on both occasions. The act in its final form, again, we'll remind you, can be accessed and viewed from the head page of the Critical Post. Ladies and gentlemen, a correction is in order concerning our numerical valuation graphic from the previous Goldwater report about the Panama Papers. It's not 17 sets of 3 zeros each, it's 18 sets of 3 zeros each, and the account belongs to the Special Federal Reserve Board with an account bearing the number 552-552-5424-AM. More on that in subsequent broadcasts. But it is interesting to note that if a 10% tax were levied on this one particular quote-unquote black screen account or off-the-ledger money, it would wipe out all of the Western civilization's nation-states' debt ledgers. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the relevant headlines from the propaganda narratives concerning the continuity of the federal government and the global regime of international economic interdependence seen from this anchor desk. On the home front, 3 obvious propaganda fluff pieces. A recent article just published in the Washington Post appears to be a fluff piece to marginalize and treat Americans out in the Northwest Territories like Idaho, Oregon, Montana, and the state of Washington, as well as others like Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, where there has been a surge of homegrown militias. They are being depicted as homegrown extremists and national security threats. Citing the recent events last January, wherein a group of self-styled homegrown patriot militias took control of an outpost, the headquarters buildings of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge near rural Burns, Oregon. The writer, one Kevin Sullivan, appears to have been dispatched to promote the Southern Poverty Law Center, an extreme leftist propaganda organization, as a pillar of integrity. In that part of the verbiage in the article, it states, quote, Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which monitors extremism, said there were about 150 such groups in 2008 and about 1,000 now. Potok and other analysts, including law enforcement officials who track the group, said their supporters number in the hundreds of thousands, counting people who signal their support in more passive ways, such as following groups on social media. For instance, the Facebook page of Oath Keepers, a group of former members of police forces and the military, for example, has more than 525,000 likes or thumbs up, unquote. When inquiring the Southern Poverty Law Center website, we read, according to the profile there, Mark Potok is one of the country's leading experts on the world of extremism and serves as the editor-in-chief of the SPLC's award-winning quarterly journal, The Intelligent Report, and its investigative reports. As if it is not a propaganda organization. It goes on further to state, a graduate of the University of Chicago, Mark has appeared on numerous television news programs and is quoted regularly by journalists and scholars in both the United States and abroad. Now, ladies and gentlemen, many in the conservative political press consider this man to be a left-wing radical kook. And I would assert that anyone can lay claim to anything they want when all are working in concert to promote the Democratic Party franchise. And that's what this appears to be. Many will recall the alleged shooting, perceived by many as an assassination by federal and local forces, from a YouTube video showing what appears to be an execution of Lavoy Finicum, one of the members in the standoff at Burns, Oregon. He was shot and killed while holding his hands in the air in a triangulation of fire from 3 separate directions. The video itself can be looked upon as a piece of propaganda, as if to say that if you go against the federal government for any reason and it is deemed unlawful, you are liable to be executed. And that's how that particular piece of propaganda may be working on some of the minds of the American public. Not to be outdone, in another fluff piece, Monsanto got a plug from the National Academy of Science stating that genetically modified food is safe in several propagandist publications like the New York Times. However, Food and Water Watch, a publication which documents independent studies about food and drink concerns, issued a statement and a position paper claiming that the academies and committee members have ties to the biotechnology industry and agricultural corporations. The group says that Monsanto, DuPont, and Dow Chemical Company each donated between $1 million and $5 million to the academies in 2014, citing a treasurer's report. And they say that the report is conflicted from the get-go. And finally, the latest broadcast from 60 Minutes aired a segment on Valerie Jarrett intended as a piece to whitewash and promote the woman's career as the current sitting president's primary advisor, as well as CBS trying to look like a serious, independent, objective news organization. In the opinion of this anchor desk, it failed on all counts, and the network's premier news moneymaker, 60 Minutes, looks like a shabby reflection of its former days. To many who still pay attention with a critical eye, it's a sad sight to behold. Other headlines. Another major leisure product retailer closing all of its stores. Retailer giant Sports Authority is reported to be closing all of its 174 stores and selling off its assets. This latest move puts several thousand more Americans into the unemployment breadlines. Another headline. The Selective Service System is on the march. Radio advertising aimed at young men aged 18 and above to register with the Selective Service Administration for the draft has been banging away on the airwaves of conservative talk show programs. Currently, it is the law and a requirement for young men to register with the Selective Service System for the draft. In a related news, trial PR balloon in the form of a Senate Armed Services Committee, a study has been floated by various outlets in the media for the past several months that the federal government has been considering making women aged 18 and above register for the draft. The Armed Services Committee voted in the affirmative to require women to register. The language was then inserted into the current NDAA, or Patriot Act, and was subsequently removed in the House version of the bill. An official from the House stated more study was needed before reconsidering the measure. Now get that, ladies and gentlemen. They're considering drafting your daughters. We predict they intend to do that. Controlled substances epidemic debate is changing its direction. There are reports that certain state legislatures are to consider opening up publicly financed shooting galleries for heroin addicts so as to shift this epidemic from the criminal into a medical emergency area, as is being practiced in places like Portugal and the Netherlands. It is likely that once the early states adopt these kinds of initiatives, there will be others that follow. The report was noticed by us coming over the very early journalism broadcast channels of the morning hours between 2 and 3 a.m. Insurance providers pulling out of more government exchanges. Insurance provider, as reported here earlier, United Healthcare, has confirmed it is pulling out of the states of Arizona, citing cost issues. In a related report, the bronze level of insurance coverage under the PPACA is set to disappear shortly. The bronze level is a subsidized high-deductible plan for catastrophic coverage. The Patient Protection Affordable Care Act is not receiving enough young enrollees who may not need coverage for many years, which was anticipated by the planners of the healthcare exchanges to support the bronze level plan. In short, ladies and gentlemen, the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act is failing. Well, that's nothing unusual. The federal government rarely does anything other than lie and waste the money of the good people of America and continue to tax without effective representation. And that's our criticism. Gas prices will continue to rise. Shale oil fracking producers are continuing to file for bankruptcy. Several industry experts cite that in order for drillers to break even, prices would have to rise to between $60 to $70 a barrel for crude. The current slide in spot Federal Reserve note demand on the F exchanges, which is trading sideways in a congestion pattern, could provide that opportunity, but not until the Federal Reserve note dollar slides underneath an index price point of approximately 90. Currently, the dollar stands in a range trading at 94 to 98. Spot crude oil prices stand trading in an area between $47 and $48 a barrel. The industry has shed 250,000 jobs, and that figure is continuing to climb. Last year alone, Texas shed 60,000 jobs in this area. This, of course, comes on the heels of Saudi Arabia to provide a glut on the worldwide market by ramping up production to near full capacity to pump the black liquid out of the ground. This contributes to other things that follow in this report. Ladies and gentlemen, the propaganda about World War III, not yet officially recognized by any government, but recognized here at the Critical Post, continues to roil in the headlines across America. The reports suggest ceasefire accords in Syria, but no agreements as yet have been reached. In another related item, it's being reported that more weapons will be shipped to Libya. That war front was opened up by then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, in which latter events regarding the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi and then subsequently an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi found American Ambassador Chris Stevens and several others killed. Some reports about Benghazi suggest that the U.S. outpost was being used for small arms weapons transfers into the Syrian war theater. On more of the financial side of World War III, counter-propaganda rhetoric is emanating from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The nation's leaders are saying they will sell off U.S. bond holdings if lawsuits are allowed to go forward in the pursuit of damages relating to the events of the 9/11 attacks upon the World Trade Center. Just recently, the Senate approved a bill that would allow the lawsuits to go forward. The spokesperson for that announcement was Senator Charles Schumer of New York. All this comes on the heels of a release of redacted testimony from 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission reports earlier this year. And there is a report, and I'm not looking at it right now, but a woman has filed a lawsuit. It is well known by some and reported here that Saudi Arabia is buying up real estate around America to ship back fresh water in many forms, including alfalfa and tankers of fresh water from American aquifers to the water-starved nation. In a report just filed by a financial magazine, the report states that outstanding U.S. Treasury debt by foreign governments stands at about $6.29 trillion of U.S. Federal Reserve note dollars. Of that, Saudi Arabia owns only a fraction of that, which amounts to $116 billion. The move by the Saudis to further their interests could possibly make freshwater-rich lands cheaper to purchase as a result of a falling dollar, which would in turn raise oil prices on the commodities markets. However, in the opinion of this anchor desk, a sale of a mere $166 billion in Treasury notes would not have, in our opinion, any lasting effects on dollar valuations. That would be because, as reported here a few days ago in our last Goldwater report, there's plenty of off-ledger money in the black screen accounts that could be leaked into the system to buy the Saudi bonds. We surmise also that's why the worldwide stock indexes are continuing to float in territory never before seen in the history of worldwide markets. And according to the economic confidence model by Martin Armstrong, we will at least be in a downturn still this year, at least until October. It'll probably slide all the way through the presidential election. The Steel Industry Caucus in Washington, D.C. still has no answers. As reported here in an earlier report, China continues to dump its large overstock of steel products. Recently, members of the EU and certain representatives of the federal government cite that a continuation of this dumping could mean further layoffs in steel-related industry here in America, and some estimates state that the figure could rise to as much as 600,000 workers. A report filed by AmericanManufacturing.org states that a figure of 150,000 jobs are at immediate risk. It is a fact, ladies and gentlemen, and it should be noted that American-founded transnational corporations have had to surrender many of their trade secrets to the Chinese government in order to take advantage of the cheap Chinese labor force. This may not be generally understood by most of the good folks here in America, but that's a fact. They have to turn over their trade secrets. In more China-related news, China is continuing to ramp up its military. The Pentagon is warning that China is continuing to change its military stance in the world at a more rapid rate. As an opinion about this from this anchor desk, it appears that corporate America, in its bid to seek comparative advantage in labor costs for manufacturing by offshoring approximately 57,000 American-founded manufacturers to the Chinese mainland over the last 25 years, has contributed to a backfire in foreign policy, and it looks as though China has snookered U.S. manufacturing into a position which aids the Chinese military in spending more money on its own forward-leaning military aspirations. In a report not long ago issued to Congress, the Pentagon estimates that Chinese military spending will grow to approximately $220 billion by the year 2020. However, ladies and gentlemen, what is not explained to the American public by any media this anchor desk is aware of is how the Chinese fight wars. For many Americans, the ancient Chinese game called Go is not something they're familiar with. It is played by positioning white and black round stones strategically on a grid of 361 intersections and lines 19 by 19, which form intersections to place the pieces in play. These stones form groups, which are considered by, as a result of any particular configuration, to be either live or dead. It is a game of war. It is either life or death. It is a game unlike chess, and it is played in almost a completely passive mode. That is to say, there is no direct confrontational manner of play, but rather several series of shadow moves unrelated to each other, or which look like they're unrelated to each other, which as the game is completed forms configurations which capture larger amounts of intersections or territory than the opponent, and thereby the stones. In short, ladies and gentlemen, and the point is, when the Chinese fight, they have a longer-term objective than meets the eye. They bring their supply chains with them, where they place their forces, leaving them within near proximity to where any particular battle is to be fought. They build their supply chains where they fight, so as not to be cut off from their supply logistics. This appears to be happening in the South China Sea. The U.S. has several treaties in place which directly confronts the Chinese by obligations to defend Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan, and recently it appears an odd bedfellow, Vietnam, is now asking for U.S. support. The Chinese are playing the game of Go. It may be the Americans are playing chess. It's not going to work. In more propaganda events, beginning with the days of gold medal Olympian Bruce Jenner to claim he was coming out to cross-dress himself and give himself a new name. There has been an ever-increasing ramp-up in the propaganda media to keep these irrelevant issues emanating from the transsexual community in the national spotlight. But is it really irrelevant? Or is it something else? What the American and British public should consider this as is culture rot. That's the opinion of this anchor desk, but this culture rot didn't suddenly or just magically appear. It has been fomented by the psychological manipulation that has been occurring in the nation's schools for the last 30 years. This manipulation comes in the form of very early sex education in preschool and grades 1 through 6, wherein children are being gently urged in school by teachers to make assessments as to their own tendencies of sexual preference in these formative years. It was reported by some news outlets as early as 2 years ago that children are being told to drop the use of the words boy and girl in preschool and kindergarten and to adopt a phrase of purple penguin during these grades. The initiative is to remove the stigma of what the psychiatric community has labeled as a disorder called gender dysphoria. The psychological malady is treatable, but that's not what is being urged by teachers. Rather, children are being manipulated to take a stance about their sexual preference identities outside of their parents' purview. And this is occurring in the public school system. In our opinion, that's how this came to be. As stated earlier, this has been going on in the schools for about 30 years with increased frequency. There is even a book that won awards about a boy that likes to wear a tangerine dress and is being read to preschoolers and passed out. Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress, I believe, is the name of the book. It's being heralded as a masterpiece. And that's just simply amazing. Certain PR outlets, like the major media corporate conglomerates posing as news reporting agencies, are no doubt being used to change the meaning of words or word substitutions like transgender in place of transsexual, or in other usages, substituting gender for sex and using linguistic propaganda, much like the czar, in place of the word secretary or head of an administrative post of the federal agencies. The people of America are bid by this anchor desk to remember this if they listen to, as we've said before, something we call the Church of the Media. Last week, in another PR trial balloon, President's Secretary of State John Kerry made a speech telling 2016 graduate students at Northeastern University of Boston, Massachusetts, that students were told, "You are about to graduate into a complex and borderless world." Clearly, ladies and gentlemen, a political speech using sly language to criticize GOP presumptive nominee Donald Trump was very much the purpose for Mr. Kerry's address. This is how the use of linguistics models tries to configure attitudes by figures in authoritative roles. And finally, on the lighter side of propaganda, in an attempt to shore up her base amidst a floundering campaign with the public, even though everyone knows that the Democratic Party is holding a coronation by fiat of superdelegates, a little while back, Hillary Clinton put out in a speech that she was willing, if elected to president, to reveal the goings-on at the infamous Area 51, thereby throwing a bone to the UFO crowd just in case there's enough out there that will vote the quote-unquote UFO card. Again, this is Scott Pollack, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Thanks one more time for watching another Critical Post Chicago report. We'll be back. That is all.